Good morning, everybody. Thank you for joining this Energy Efficiency Loan Fund webinar. Today we will be looking at energy efficiency for Welsh organisations and the support available through the Energy Efficiency Loan Fund and the Green Business Fund. Now, just a couple of things before we get started. If you do have any questions, you can type these into the question pane of your control panels on the right-hand side of your screen. Type these in at any time and we will do our best to cover these in the Q&A session at the end. We will also be sending around the slides from today's webinar. It will be recorded and available to view in full on our YouTube channel in the coming days. Before we get started, I'd like to introduce myself. My name is Christian Davis-Lloyd and I'm the Principal Loans Advisor here at the Carbon Trust, and I oversee the day-to-day management of the Energy Efficiency Loan Fund. I've been with the Carbon Trust for over 2 years now, but within the energy efficiency sector for the last 9 years. So in terms of today's webinar, these are the areas that we're going to be looking at. I will start by introducing you to the Carbon Trust, who we are and what we do, before an introduction to energy efficiency and a number of key areas where organisations such as yours can make changes to reduce energy consumption and become resource efficient. In today's webinar, we'll be looking at lighting, heating and cooling, and other electrical equipment. I will then move through to the final section where I will outline the support available from us through both the Energy Efficiency Loan Fund and the Green Business Fund. So to begin, who are we and what do we do? Well, for those of you that don't know very much about the Carbon Trust, just some quick background information. We are a mission-driven, not-for-profit, and our mission is to accelerate the move to a sustainable low carbon economy, and the way we do that is through our 3 main areas of work, through advice such as today's webinar, where we advise businesses, governments and the public sector on their opportunities in a low carbon world; footprinting, where we measure and certify the environmental footprint of organisations, products and services. You may recognise some of the logos in the bottom footer of this slide here; and technology, where we help develop and deploy low carbon technologies and solutions. I'll now begin the main body of our webinar with a brief introduction about the importance of energy efficiency, why it's important for organisations and the common barriers faced. I wanted to start with a helpful graph that just shows to you that for a typical organisation, of course, it would depend on the sector you are in as to what the proportion is, that energy costs can account for around 30% of running costs. Now, just think about if you could reduce that, the sort of opportunities that would create for your business. And today we will look at some of the areas that can help you reduce that and how we can support you with that as well. So why is it important to undertake measures to reduce energy consumption? Why would you want to do it? Well, one, it generates cost savings. So undertaking energy efficiency measures produces cost savings for the organisation, and therefore it allows you to operate leaner and more efficiently. 2, it lowers the organisation's impact on the environment by reducing carbon emissions. And 3, it also helps you comply with regulation or certain requirements for winning new business. Increasingly, we are seeing businesses being asked to provide evidence that they operate sustainably through tender processes. It asks them to share their environmental policy, carbon footprint and general carbon management of what you're doing to try and lessen your environmental footprint. So the business case for energy efficiency is really compelling. What are the barriers for organisations, for SMEs? What puts you off and what doesn't work for you here? There are a number of barriers that we come across for when organisations are looking at implementing energy efficiency measures. Many don't have the time to commit to energy efficiency measures. Others might not have the capital to implement changes, or there are other projects within the business that are competing for investment. Sometimes there's just a lack of expertise and understanding as to what is best to focus on. If you're in a tenanted building, which in Wales in business parks is quite often the case, then there's a lack of control over the building as a tenant, and perhaps you don't have that control to implement these energy efficiency measures. Disinterested staff, it's often a problem where staff are disinterested in energy efficiency, certainly if they're not responsible for it. And today's webinar will look to address some of these common barriers. And to note as well, we can support with most of these issues, whether it's an interest-free loan for capital investment for energy efficiency, some useful tips from our Green Business Fund guides as to where you should be focusing your efforts, or engaging with staff using some of our free tools and resources that we have online, engagement campaign guides and labels and posters that you can display in your offices. So the first point we want to look at is lighting and the energy saving opportunities that are available with lighting. Now, for a lot of organisations, this is probably the most obvious energy spend, and it can be quite a large one. Most offices, warehousing, factories, not most, every will have lighting of some form. There can be significant cost savings through considering your equipment, the maintenance of that equipment, and staff habits. Now, there are some simple and inexpensive ways to reduce energy through a switch-off policy. Now, it's important that staff are engaged with this, where you switch off lights that are not used or infrequently used. And for the lighting you already have, you may be able to reduce or remove lighting that are infrequently used. Now, the picture on the right-hand side here of this slide shows some lighting in an energy audit that we came across. That's quite poorly positioned. The lighting is at the top of these cupboards, which doesn't really need to be done. It's lighting the tops of the cupboards. A solution might be, and especially with panel lighting like this, would be to move them into the center of the room so the lighting is doing what it should be doing and lighting the entire space. Or you could think of switching them off entirely if there's adequate lighting there and if they're not required. Also, make use of natural daylight, so remove obstructions from in front of windows, plants, cupboards, etc. So if you've got cupboards in front of windows or hiding portions of windows, make sure you remove them, remove things from windowsills and clear up those windowsills so as much natural daylight floods into the building as possible. I also wanted to share with you a story that one of my colleagues told me when they conducted an energy assessment for a school. Now, the school had been refurbished, and they had noticed that they were spending a lot of money on energy, on electricity, despite installing an LED lighting system. They didn't know why it was so high, and it wasn't until they realised one of the classrooms had a false ceiling, and when they took away the panel, they noticed that there were a number of light bulbs under there that had been switching on with the main gang for almost 10 years. Nobody had noticed it. It was hidden and wasting a lot of money. They removed the additional lights, and they saw significant savings. So it's definitely worth bearing in mind that if you're in a site that has been occupied previously, it's really worth doing a deep dive and checking everything thoroughly. Another thing that is very useful to do, and which a lot of older buildings perhaps might not have, is looking at the control of your lighting. So things like occupancy sensors, so that would stop you having to rely on employees turning off lights, and it removes that human error aspect. Things like passive infrared sensors or PIR sensors sense when people are around and turn lights off when there is no one there. For example, our open plan offices here at the Carbon Trust in London, some days when there are a lot of people out at client meetings or on sites and the office is not full, our lights will switch off when we're not using them, so half the office will be lit, half the office will not be lit. It's also a good suggestion for meeting rooms and corridors, rooms which are infrequently used, where employees may forget to switch off lights from time to time. Another thing to think about is daylight sensors. We come across offices are overlit, and certainly on sunny days, you don't necessarily need the lighting on at all these days, or at least not as bright. Daylight sensors detect the lux levels in the office and either turn off or reduce the lighting when there is sufficient daylight. You obviously need to see, but a lot of the time it is far too bright and people don't really think about turning the lights off. Labelling lights is also something to consider. A lot of the time people might be apprehensive about what they are allowed to use and when they can use them, and labelling lights is a great way to do this. And there are some free resources that we have available on our website, some labels that you can use for your lighting equipment. Once you have tackled this, and certainly if you have old and inefficient lighting, you may want to consider replacing your lighting system. If you are replacing your lighting, LED is the best way to go. They are more expensive in the short term, but over the lifespan of the lights, it is much, much cheaper, and the savings will be recovered, and the cost of the equipment will be recovered through savings quite fast. They are the highest efficacy and lamp life compared to older lighting types such as halogen. They are instantly on, which is a benefit. And we also have a free lighting guide available online, which will help you support an LED lighting project. This is also a project that we could support through our Energy Efficiency Loan Fund, which I will touch on later. And now we look at some heating and cooling tips. For typical organisations, heating can account for between 20 and 40% of total energy costs. And in terms of the savings that this creates, typically around a third of your energy costs can be saved from just improving your heating systems. So some things that can be done is to obtain feedback from your staff about the heating and cooling levels, actively engaging with them, so that you can identify hotspots within the business and identify areas which are perhaps much too cold. Now, before you consider your heating and cooling requirements, you will first need to understand where all your boilers are, where areas of the building are served by each system, which systems are serving each buildings. Some organisations we come across have multiple boilers, certainly large premises, that are providing heat to different areas. Understand which of these areas are also controlled independently, either by time or by temperature. And with that, then look at the times that your system is running. It's very rare that we find that heating systems, certainly in organisations where the heating system is running at the right time. Check the working schedule of your staff when they're working and when you will need heating. A recent example that we've come across is a community centre where they had several rooms hired out on an hourly basis, and this can equally apply to meeting rooms. The heating need not be set to work all day, but only when those rooms are occupied. We've seen scenarios where meeting rooms and halls are heated for 12 hours a day, but perhaps the occupation of those rooms are only 4 to 5 hours. Now, bringing the timer setting in line with the hours of use could save a significant amount of energy. You should also recognise the activities that do not require full temperature, such as cleaning. So it may be acceptable to use these times as a warm-up and cool-down times when your cleaning staff are carrying out these activities. Setting temperatures is also key to achieving energy savings, setting them correctly, ensuring that the temperatures of the thermostats are set accurately, first of all. Thermometers can also be bought very cheaply. So place these thermometers in key areas of building and compare these readings to the thermostat readings to understand how the temperatures throughout the building vary. Then recognise the potential issues and make adjustments. Just ensure the windows aren't open, minimise the use of fan heaters, remove equipment blocking the radiators, install thermostatic radiator valves or TRVs where radiators don't have them, and also check that thermostats are well sited. So often we see that these are situated next to open doors or next to windows, which means the temperature readings they take are lower than the average building temperature. And what this does is it causes this heating system to overheat the building. And an interesting fact is that overheating by 1 degree can increase consumption by 8%. So ensuring thermostats are set to the recommended levels is a simple energy saving measure and one that can save you significant amounts. And CIBSE provide some recommended temperatures for different building types depending on the level of activity, and it's really useful to review that every now and again, just to make sure that you're setting the temperatures in accordance to what they should be. For example, buildings where people are active should be between 14 and 19 degrees, and buildings or areas where people are sedentary should be between heated to around 21 degrees. And further on in the presentation, I'll show you a extract from that guide as well. Now, for those with both heating and cooling requirements, another really important thing to have in place is this dead band. As you can see from the thermometer scale in the slide, you want to have a period in the middle where heating and cooling, neither of them are on. This is to stop the fighting between the different systems. You want to create a dead band, and the dead band is where you wait for the temperature to hit as low as possible before you start heating, and you wait until you reach the highest possible temperature before you start cooling. In this example, you'll see that you wait until the temperature goes down to 90 degrees before heating, and then 24 degrees before it starts cooling. As long as you can keep this between this, you can avoid doing both heating and cooling simultaneously. So you're trying to keep this temperature within this dead band to provide it wildly oscillating between temperatures. And as I alluded to earlier, here's an extract from the CIBSE guide, which lists the recommended measures and recommended temperatures for different types of rooms. Now, balancing your heating system is also important. In conventional single pipe radiator-based systems, balancing the heating system can save around 8%. In a typical single pipe radiator-based system, water would leave the boiler at around 80 degrees and reaches the first radiators, and in this example it's on the ground level, through which heat is dissipated. The water temperature decreases as the heat is dissipated to the surrounding floors, so the first level, the second level. Now, to avoid the areas furthest away from the boiler being underheated, the heating system should be balanced. This would involve ensuring that the flow of water to the radiators is limited to the radiators nearest to the boiler, and this also prevents the areas nearest the boiler being overheated. So if you haven't had this reviewed or maintained in some time, it might be worth having an engineer have a look over that as well. Hot water systems are often run continuously, and temperature settings are often set too high. So energy use associated with hot water can typically be reduced. They're often neglected. And to make energy savings in this area, set your water temperatures to around 80 degrees, and temperatures shouldn't be reduced much lower than this to avoid the risk of Legionnaire's disease. Ensure that hot water systems have a timer which is set to provide hot water in line with your business operating hours, and that's another important point. Also think about whether your hot water tank is appropriately sized, if it's too big or too small, or whether it could be replaced with a smaller hot water tank. Evaluate where the hot water is needed within your premises, and therefore whether the tank is appropriately sited. Is your hot water tank at one end of your premises, but all your showers and taps at the other end? In this case, it may be more appropriate to put point of use water heaters in place, and that would eliminate distribution losses from the hot water tank to these points of use. Such hot water systems fitted at the point of use provide water instantaneously, and they are more appropriate in instances where small volumes of hot water are required at a time. Now, investing in energy efficiency equipment or energy efficient boilers is definitely worth looking at, though before you do so, remember to look at your controls and pipework, as we've just explained, before changing the equipment. Now, changing a boiler is one of the biggest single improvements to a heating system you can make, as most modern boilers are over 90% efficient. And it's worth remembering that most older boilers, certainly those over 15 years, are not condensing. Condensing boilers are also more efficient at part load than their conventional counterparts. And condensing water, they condense water vapor and the exhaust gases to recover heat that would otherwise be wasted. Additionally, boilers that are over 40 years old, and we've supported such replacements through the loan fund, we've seen vast savings, as they can be, the older boilers can be less than 45% efficient. However, it's very important to first insulate your building to limit your losses so that you only produce the heat that you need. Now, air conditioning is a very energy intensive process. There's typically 30% savings to be made from reducing the need for it. Avoid using AC where you can by taking advantage of natural ventilation techniques, so opening windows, create airflow through a building, cooling a building using night air, certainly through the summer months, and retrofitting solar film on windows can reduce solar heat gain as well. Now, between 1960 and 2000, the cooling requirement in the UK increased significantly, but the heating requirement only reduced very slightly. Now, this is probably due to the increase in energy using equipment within buildings that gives off heat, so PCs, servers, photocopying equipment, and as we're set to experience hotter summers, the demand for AC is set to increase, and therefore it is increasingly important to evaluate the need for air conditioning and to avoid it where possible. Now, do also remember to regularly maintain your system to ensure it operates at its best and it's as energy efficient as possible. Filters can clog up with dust, and that makes the motors within these systems work much harder and demanding more energy. Replacing those systems beyond life where it's not feasible to maintain them anymore can improve energy efficiency and reduce consumption considerably. Now, you also need to be aware of regulations concerning energy efficiency. I've outlined a couple of these here. Your gas appliance must be regularly maintained with an annual gas check by gas-safe engineers, and a properly maintained gas boiler can improve efficiencies by up to 30%. Since April 2018, it has also been unlawful to let residential or commercial properties with an EPC rating of F or G. These are the two lowest grades of energy efficiency. And the UK currently implements the requirements with respect to F gases from the EU. Recommendations have been made by the Committee on Climate Change that these F gas regulations of the EU should at least be mirrored under UK laws, or that the UK should remain within these EU schemes, certainly post the UK leaving the European Union. And F-gas regulations also dictate that operators of air conditioning equipment must keep records of the entire plant, ensure that leak tests are done on time, and only allow personnel to work on their equipment. We'll also look at some other electrical equipment within offices and businesses within Wales. Out of hours electrical use is a significant contribution to organisations' energy expenditure. So just remember to turn off and power down and switch off all equipment when it's not in use, and enable power down modules on computers, printers, monitors. A suggestion might also be to create a checklist for colleagues. Nominate an individual that at the end of the business day, they go around and just make sure that everything is switched off. The nominated individual will be responsible for ensuring that all equipment is, where possible, switched off or otherwise in a hibernate or standby mode. Also consider fitting 7-day timers to equipment such as printers and photocopiers. These switch off each night when they're not required, and then on again each morning ahead of the working day, so it limits any disruption there. This extends also to computers, printers, vending machines, and other equipment such as extractor fans, etc. IT equipment accounts for a large chunk of energy use as well, so a simple change might be to set a default setting for when they should shut down or hibernate and how long they should be active for. I've included some really good figures about printing to highlight the cost that we often forget about when printing. Remember that double-sided not only saves paper, but it also saves energy. And over the course of the year, that makes up a big chunk. You'll also want to consider where you're locating printers and copiers. This is also an equally important thing. Ideally, you want to place your copies and printers in separated, well-ventilated areas. These appliances emit a lot of heat, and by having these in separate areas will reduce the need for cooling. Certainly during the summer months, maybe you want to move them back in the winter, heat the areas, but certainly you want to reduce the need for cooling, and perhaps moving them away from desks as well. Too often it'll be convenient just to print and pick them up from the side of the desk. So try and change habits and move them away from desks. And now we look at the Energy Efficiency Loan Fund and the Green Business Fund from the Carbon Trust, and I'll just quickly outline the support that's available from each. So the Energy Efficiency Loan Fund has been running for 16 years. The loan fund aims to encourage organisations to invest in energy efficiency equipment and renewable technologies. So it's there to allow you to make that capital investment and to implement such energy efficiency projects. Our loans that we offer are between 3,000 to 20,000. 200,000, I beg your pardon, we support most projects where an energy improvement provides carbon emissions of at least 10%. The repayment period reflects the energy payback, so we typically look at your loan amount and we divide that by your annual energy savings, and that dictates what your repayment period is. It's up to a maximum of 48 months. Savings are sense checked by our engineers to ensure that these savings are achievable. So when you apply for a loan from us, we will have you will provide a energy saving assessment. Our engineers will sense check those just to ensure that the supplier is providing you with accurate savings, that these are achievable, and that you can recover these within the lifetime of the scheme. Our loans are interest-free, they are unsecured, and there are no set-up fees. Essentially, what you draw down is exactly what you repay. If you draw down £10,000 loan, you repay £10,000 to the penny to the pound. You can read more about the loan fund online, and the link is at the bottom of the screen there, and also the terms and conditions. Obviously, they are capped by the loan amounts and loan values and by energy savings, but also by the credit report that we have from third-party credit referencing agencies. So the eligibility criteria for the loan. To be considered for a loan, the organisation must be a privately funded SME in Wales. That's open to charities as well. An SME, or the definition of SME, is less than 250 employees, turnover of less than 50 million euro, and or balance sheet of less than 43 million euro. You must operate in a sector permissible under EU state aid regulation. So the exclusions include primary agriculture, so farming, dairy, horticulture, fisheries, transport, coal. These are all areas where EU state aid applies. The organisation must not have exceeded the de minimis state aid threshold of 200,000 euros over the last 3 years. And you must have been trading for a minimum trading period of 12 months for limited companies, 36 months for unincorporated, and you must also have a good credit reference as well. Now, the energy efficiency projects undertaken by our clients typically have an average payback of just 3 years. Some projects, such as lighting, offer paybacks within 1 to 2 years. Lighting is one of the most common projects that we have that come through the loan scheme here. And for SMEs, the savings in this scale are a huge benefit. It allows you to free up some cash within the business as well. And as I alluded to earlier on, access to suitable upfront finance can often be a barrier to the uptake of these measures. And an interest-free loan from us really helps to overcome these and achieves buy-in for the projects. I just wanted to share with you a recent case study as well for Bryn Tanat. It's a large country house in Powys. We've supported them twice, in fact, once with a biomass boiler, which we've got here, another time with a PV project that came back to us some years later. We supported them with a loan to fund the wood pellet boiler, which is installed in a cladded shipping container to blend into the surroundings. It replaced 3 old inefficient boilers. So as we mentioned earlier, a number of larger premises can have multiple boilers serving multiple places. So this was all brought into one boiler, central boiler serving one premises. The system links with heat exchangers to the existing hot water and heating systems. The total cost of the biomass upgrade was in excess of £80,000, and at the time we supported them with a 75% loan from us. That loan was also paid off within 4 years, with the monthly payments covered by the energy savings. We did support this project, or we supported another project with a PV array for Bryn Tanat, and one of the owner wanted to just share a quote from that, and he said, "We've recently sold the Carbon Trust support for a 29 kilowatt PV array. The installation was taking place last month, and it would significantly reduce our energy costs. The PV system will supplement the electrical requirements and should cover most of the electrical demand during the day. The PV system will contribute towards the generation of hot water in the most efficient ways. We couldn't have undertaken this work without the Carbon Trust." Now, we also offer support through our Green Business Fund, which offers support to SMEs not only in Wales, but across Great Britain. The services offered include the Virtual Energy Manager, which is one of the tailored modules delivered by regular telephone calls to identify savings associated with energy management. We also have a number of technical webinars that are offered to learn about energy efficiency and business opportunities. Now, these have since ceased, but the recordings of these can be found on our YouTube channel. And finally, we have a wide variety of publications and guides that can help provide information on how to become more energy efficient. Some of these are technology specific, some of these are industry specific. So it's a really useful resource for SMEs. And more recently, we've developed a number of great tools. We've developed a carbon footprint calculator, which supports SMEs to report or manage or calculate their carbon footprint through entering some of the most common emission sources, including electricity, gas, and fuel consumption. This tool is available on our website. And once you've calculated your footprint, you may want to benchmark this using our benchmark tool, which benchmarks your energy usage against others. And those that have identified that lighting upgrades are a suitable opportunity for you to implement, or energy efficiency opportunity for you to implement, you might want to use the business case tool to build a business case for these lighting upgrades. Now, that concludes our webinar for today.